Unahaganisinga, Zan Bechu, Nabimiyadachin. Welcome back, everyone, to Rising Warriors, Rachael Kulei. This is going to be a special kind of topic dear to my heart in ways. I come from the Northwest Spanish Shoshone. That's who I'm affiliated with. But I also, on my father's side, I'm Nez Perce, Osage, and Blackfoot. But then I also come from the Hungarian and Danish descendants as well. Today, I have my special adopted sister here with me, Renea Menchaca, and she is going to be talking to us today about the Two-Spirit. But before we get started there, I'm going to have her introduce herself and where her people come from. Go ahead.
Hi, Taco Day. My name's Renea Menchaca. I'm Pascua, Yaqui, and White Mountain Apache from Arizona. And my pronouns I use is they, them, or she, her. I'm generational Two-Spirit. Thank you for having me here today.
I'm excited for this. So she is an educator, and so I asked her to come on and educate us on the Two-Spirit. So she does a lot of work here in the community in Portland, Oregon, and I'm excited to talk about this. So what got you started in talking about this and starting to step up and use your voice in the community and bringing awareness?
It started in 2010 when my youngest child was Miss Delta Park. And towards the end of rain, usually royalty does a giveaway. And so my child asked me, Mom, do you think it's possible if I can have a Two-Spirit special? Because I love to switch dance. And their favorite switch dance category was, grass dance. And so I said, well, let's talk to Grandma about that and see, and the rest of the family, what they say. And I'll talk to some of the community members to see how much, how many would support us on this cause. And I go, but if we do this, we're going to do this the right way. We're not going to have a switch dance where, people just randomly wear somebody's regalia, and sometimes they make a mocketry, they mock it, and it's just very inappropriate. So I told my child, if we're going to do this, it's going to be appropriate. The dancers have to be in full regalia and dance the dance categories correctly, and my child was in agreement on it, did agree on it. So we got consent and confirmation from my family. And then I reached out to Seattle Medmo and Linda Mianes for support. So we were able to come up with three winners, and we made sure that the Bow and Arrow Culture Club was aware of our special, and that they would also put that onto their flyer, their PR. During that time, Seattle reached out to me and asked if I needed support. I said yes, and so did Asa, right? I said, yes, I can use your guys' support, because Bow and Arrow's getting hate mail, emails saying that why are we promoting, or why are we engaging in things like this, promoting, LGBTQ, gay, whatever they said, emails. And but again, we were trying to take pride in our culture and in our family, and also create space, for Two-Spirit people to be able to participate without being reprimanded. Yeah. So we ended up having the Two-Spirit special in 2010 at the end of my child's reign. We had 3 judges, 2 were elder. My child was one of them, and then Asa Wright did like a little bit of educating, like a brief mini bio of the Two-Spirit people to the community. And then we all asked that the community that were in support to stand up and surround the outer part of the arbor to support those that were participating in the Two-Spirit special. So we had 3 dancers come. One came from Seattle, and another one came from Chimawa Indian Boarding School, and then we had a local dancer that participated. That was the first time that I've ever seen a special, or anyone has, a lot of people told me that's the first time they ever encountered or participated in a Two-Spirit special. and they were grateful for it. Yes, we did have backlash. Some people were upset with us for having this special, but it was well needed, and
I
that's how.
remember that.
Yeah, that's how it started. And so I wanted to honor my child that way because my child always wanted to grass dance, but because my child was born female gender, that is not allowed, to do, not unless it's a switch dance. So in honor of my child and my child wanted to also honor the Two-Spirit community. My child chose to have this specialist category. And from there, that's when I started noticing that we needed to have more awareness and more education based around Two-Spirit communities. And so what brought me to our youth Two-Spirit community was when I started in 2012, I was volunteering at one of our well-known organization known as NARA Northwest with our Two-Spirit group. We started the group with Shane Lopez and Solomon Trimble, and we had a group of kids, and including my children were part of that group. And my children were having challenges because several of the kids that were involved with the youth group, the Two-Spirit youth group, they were upset because they claimed that I was fragile, that I was making it up, that how can Renee be Two-Spirit if she's got children and she's with a straight partner, which they say straight cis partner, and which is a male. And my children were very upset with them, and they didn't want to participate anymore because of that. They were being, biased and discriminating me because I had children. So I had to explain to the group of youth that the history of the Two-Spirit people wasn't based on what sex you were. It was, back then, a lot of the Two-Spirit people married straight, tribal members because it was seen as a taboo to marry your own kind, because other Two-Spirit were seen as siblings. So you didn't marry your own kind. You married, you took either a husband or a wife, or you took your status wherever you were placed. And that information, we got that information from back east when Harlan did a lecture at Portland State University. Cornell, Pee Wee Wardy had brought him in. And it seemed to make sense, that was where we were when it came to relationships, And because my preference at the time, I had a straight gender male. Like I said, I don't go with people that I'm attracted to based on sex. It's whoever creator brings my way, if I'm compatible with that person.
Exactly.
It happens to be, straight male genders, and so I had asked Siadam, can we borrow your timeline? Because Siadam had her committee at the time she was working at Lewis and Clark. They had a timeline.
Okay.
Very culture and community along with photos and stuff. So we brought that to NARA and we placed it all around the center, at the youth center. And we started having discussions about it. What is Two-Spirit? What does it mean to be Two-Spirit? The similarities of Two-Spirit versus, the other acronyms that are out there as well. There's a lot of parallel, but doesn't mean, we fit into some of those categories, or, a lot of times people go, well, can I be Two-Spirit? And I go, well, if you're Indigenous and, and you're part of your community or your tribe, yeah, you can,
Yeah.
So, we have a lot of similarities, but then we also have a status within our own culture, and a responsibility. So, that's when we started. I started from there. I started having conversations with some of my colleagues at Portland State University that were also Two-Spirit. And we created a group there as well, about education in our community around the Two-Spirit people and culture. And how are we going to do this, We do it in a healthy way,
Right.
That we're not like stepping on people's toes, but also we have boundaries too, and we're not going to allow people to bully us, to keep us quiet regarding the Two-Spirit culture or the, the people. So I started working for Indian Ed and in Vancouver. And after I graduated Portland State University, I was still having these conversations with my colleagues and with Dr. Pee Wee Cornell. regarding the Two-Spirit people. And upon my arrival in Vancouver, I noticed there was a need for resources and visuals, because I had several of the students there coming out to me, and there's no resources there, more or less resources for Native, families there in Vancouver. There's a big need for that. So I started posting, visuals up in my office, make it feel more trauma informed, more accommodating and more welcoming. Because again, I'm serving the youth, not myself or not the older community. Again, this program is for youth,
Right.
I don't know if it made parents feel uncomfortable. I mean, it was never brought to my attention, but of course, the kids, were my attention, and that was needed there. After my program ended, I applied at Nea Family Center. And I was working with my boss, Clay River, at the time, and they were Two-Spirit, and they just got a promotion, so they were doing management, and they needed help in the classroom setting down in the Native school, the Many Nations Academy. And they asked me if I would be able to substitute, and I said, sure, And so I substituted for Clay several times, and the kids, I got a lot of good feedback from the kids. They were able to produce their artwork in a timely manner, and then I noticed that their attendance, it was progressing. They were coming more often. So I gave all that information back to my manager, Clay, and we had new students come in, and I was doing some curriculum based on like switch dance, powwow, regalia, things like that. And one of the students said out loud, "Oh yeah, there goes my cousin. He's like that. He's gay," and started chuckling. And I looked at the student. I'm like, "Well, I want to meet that cousin of yours. Isn't that special?" I'm like, "I'm happy to know that your cousin is, Two-Spirit. That's wonderful." And the student was like, "Whoa," wasn't that was like quiet, And after class, I had a discussion with the student, and I let the student know that here at NEA, everyone's welcome. This is a safe space. This is a safe school, a safe organization, and that no matter what culture or what gender, everyone's welcome here. And, we want to make sure that we're being mindful of that, and that we're, also looking at, others and their feelings, because we don't know what's going on with them or at home. So, and that student was really quiet after that. And I noticed that that same student happened to mention it, but in a different class. And one of the teachers addressed it. And so I'm like, I hear this G word around, gay word, running around, or he or she are like that, like it's something like bad, and the kids, shouldn't be feeling that, that hate language like that. It's so inappropriate. Not only is it inappropriate for the other students, but for me, it was making me feel uncomfortable, And so I brought that to my manager's attention, Clay, and I asked Clay, I go, "Clay, is there anything that I can do to, help our students with, awareness on acceptance and how diverse we are as people, and, just creating that conversation, or what can I do to help with that?" And so that the other kids are not feeling bullied or feeling withdrawn, feeling isolated. And Clay mentioned that they had started a Two-Spirit youth group, and it was started by 3 of the students there that were currently there when I was working there too. And it went dormant because Clay didn't have the manpower or the capacity to reopen the club again. And therefore, Clay gave me permission to restart the club, and the information on the 3 students who were the founders, along with like visuals and stuff like that, the logo, everything. So all that information was passed to me, including the Two-Spirit drum that Clay had put aside for the students. And so I went ahead and took the initiative and took that on my plate and said, yeah, this is needed. We need to start this program or this club again, because I see the information that's going around in the school, and it's not healthy. some of the kids are afraid to come to school, and I'm not feeling comfortable. So we're going to start this. So I approached 3 students, and that's where it bloomed from there. So that was back in 2017. We started with 3. By 2018, it went up to 8 students. By 2019, we're up to about 15, and now we're about 24. And within that club that we have for the kids, they went ahead and created a rainbow logo of a rainbow eagle. And they added more wording to the name. So now it's called Two Spirit Safe Space Alliance. They were able to receive a grant. The kids wrote for a grant, an anti-bully grant. So it's anti-violence for, LGBTQ Two-Spirit awareness. So the kids were able to receive that grant, and we were able to bring like more resources to NEA for the youth community that identify, along with gatherings. We had a Two-Spirit prom for 2 years in a row. That was funded. Our first year, we had about 25 students, and the next year we had 350.
Oh, wow.
We were able to do a lot of outreach and collaborate with other organizations to make sure that our Indigenous youth had resources that they can tap into as well, and that safe space. We were able to get our students to participate in the Pride, Portland Pride as well, with News and Smirk. So the kids marched twice in a row back in 2019 and 18. And we were also able to encourage staff to participate as well. So because of those efforts, we have about 22 staff that identify there at NEA. That are Two-Spirit. And so, and then having the kids, know who we are as staff people, so that if they need somebody to talk to and feel, safe, or someone they can confide in, they know who we are. So if you first walk into NEA, there's a glass board right in the front lobby.
Yeah.
And that was what I did, was to create that education piece around that glass case there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there you'll see that there's language there, how tribes address their Two-Spirit people. Some might be, positive language, some might be negative, but there's also history, how, before pre-colonization into what happened during colonization until we're at now. So it's like a before and after board there. So we started that in 2018, and then again in 2019, just to educate our community regarding Two-Spirit people, and then also, reclaiming status, bringing that education to our community. Yes, we had some resistance there, with the boarding school, era of the elders, because again, they were raised and educated that it was, looked as something that was negative, that it was wrong, to be a
taboo.
Yeah. And you don't talk about it, and you don't associate with it. What we're trying to do is to educate, the community and families that it is something that is normal. We are, creating not just, one or two, we have lots of genders. I mean, you look at the, plants, you look at, sea life, they're all diverse. Not all of them have one or the other gender. There's, our animal relations, out there are Two-Spirit, and, they have both, genders, and procreate on their own, and even plants, so my mom would say, God didn't want us, they wouldn't have made us, and we're all over, we're globally,
Yes, exactly.
all over the globe,
Yes.
And it's not just people, our animal relations are Two-Spirit as well, and plants, so mom would always say that to me. And I was like, yeah, it makes sense, Mom, because, I know in some tribes, the medicine people need Two-Spirit people to conduct ceremonies, or else there's no balance there, How can you balance yourself if you don't have, the presence of Two-Spirit people? And I know in the Diné culture, it's needed, it's very vital. And
same in my culture too.
You have to have that balance. And my mother's like, no wonder, there's so many issues with this world today. It's because they have us in hiding, and we're not taking our place, where we need to be. And that's why it's created so much hate and division among our people, that we're that within our tribe, we're also colonizing ourselves by allowing that, we're
Right.
allowing that colonization and assimilation to take place when it's not of our culture. That's Western perspective. That's Western culture. That's what my mom would say. And I said, yeah, I agree on that. But then yet my mom growing up in the 70s and 80s, don't be telling people. She would always
Yeah. Yeah,
what?
keep it
What are you
quiet.
talking about?
Keep it quiet. Shh.
Keep it quiet. I was like, okay,
Uh-huh.
stories, but outside of the house, I gotta keep it hush,
Uh-huh. That's the same thing with me.
But I didn't understand, but it was because my mother knew that the way the world was, but racism and discrimination, that I figured she probably wanted to keep me safe
Yeah.
and the family safe. So that's why we never discussed it outside of the home, especially in those days,
Yeah.
And because in those days, when the AIDS epidemic came out in the 80s, the LGBTQ two-spirit, communities were targeted. A lot of hate crimes. People were being beaten, were being killed, just based on their genders,
Yeah.
back in those days. And now I understand why my mother was like that, trying to keep me, to keep our status quiet, keep it hush, because it was for protection,
Yeah.
And so I understand that. And growing up in the 70s and 80s, there really wasn't much, spaces or places for us, to go. Like, I don't ever recall having a community center for youth or for families, that identify. Not even like the indigenous, communities had any space for us, growing up. Back in the 70s, we only had one flag, that rainbow flag, and like what, 4 acronyms.
Right.
And now you have all these
Right.
flags.
Right.
I'm like, it's all new to me because I'm from the 70s and 80s growing up. All these new gender flags, they're like, it's awesome, but I'm still learning too. And my mother's like, what does all this mean? Because she's, from the 60s and 50s, and she's like, this is so different, And I would go, Mom, I have a question for him. Like, if you knew you were two-spirit, because back then, two-spirit, that word two-spirit didn't come up until the 1990s. But I just told my mom, if you knew you were, you liked women and men and all this, I go, why did you get married?
Yeah.
to my dad? And she was telling me, well, because back then that was what you did. That was the social norm back in the 50s and 60s. You got married to the opposite sex, whether you liked it or not. That's what you did. And you didn't question it because again, her mother was raised Catholic, So my mom, got married to my father because that's what they did. It was a social norm. And that's what her uncles did. And her, sister did, and her cousins, And I'm like, oh, okay. I go, well, yeah, it kind of makes sense. I go, because if you didn't marry, I go, I wouldn't have been born,
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. And I go, so now that I'm a lot older and she's divorced my father, I go, so are you comfortable where you're at now? Because my mother was taking partners that were female gender. And so, but they weren't from our culture, that were from other cultures, And so growing up, that's what she preferred, Right now, my mom is by herself and she's in her 70s. So she doesn't want a partner. She's happy where she's at now. But I understand, why she got married, why it was kept hushed, And because of our society wasn't accepted, of our people, not just our people, but the others too, the LGBTQ, and also because of the religious background, Catholic. It's considered taboo. You don't, date people from the same gender. That's what they would tell, my mom and my grandmother, being Catholic. They were very strict. And they didn't believe in divorce either. So I was surprised that my mother got divorced, Yeah. They're very strict. And so with that, and so I was like, okay, now I understand why she was so protective, And looking at the history of the two-spirit people, a lot of us were put into hiding by force because, when the colonizers came to our continent, a lot of our Two-Spirit people were murdered, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that history there documented and recorded, you know, because we were Two-Spirit, because it wasn't part of their culture, you know, they were gonna get rid of it and they were gonna kill us all off. That's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why a lot of us, you know, went into hiding. And when we felt it was safe enough to come out, that's when you started seeing it coming out little by little, you know. But still, you know, it was still behind closed doors and it still wasn't accepted because, again, a lot of our people were raised in missionary or boarding schools where they taught, you know, you don't do that, you know, or you don't become that. That is
Mm-hmm.
not a norm, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
so with my mom's generation and her sister and her uncle, you know, they started coming out because they felt that, okay, they're a little bit comfortable now. It's not as bad as it was before. And that's when I started to see, okay, so it's not just mom, it's others too in our family.
Yeah.
So, yeah. We still like it's still slow moving. The process is still slow, but we're showing some progress, you know, because we have a lot more to offer to spirit, you know, families and youth and elders, you know, a lot way more than we did back in the 80s and 90s. And we're
Mm-hmm.
still working on that, you know. How can we make this better for our people? What kind of resources do we need? So we're constantly in development, you know, and
Yeah.
collaborating with others, you know, because again, you see a high rate of suicide, you know, among our young native, you know, youth because
Mm-hmm.
it's really hard for them to navigate, you know, how they feel about themselves or to navigate that they are two-spirit when you don't have that support at home or when you don't have that support in your tribe, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
your community. So they
Mm-hmm.
figured that, you know, if they, you know, commit suicide, it's an easy way out, easier way out because they're suffering from not having those resources. And so that's also, you know, that was also part of my motivation was to stop that too. You know, the suicide attempts, you know, the running away, the dependency on alcohol, you know, and drugs because they're not feeling supported of their identity,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
So
instead of,
that kind of asks what's one thing or what are some things that you may talk about or teach or help families with that you could tell the viewers, what are ways that we can as communities support Two Spirit?
um, we always make sure that the community are very mindful of the pronouns the kids use, youth use, or an individual, regardless of what they look like in the outside. It's what
Mm-hmm.
they feel, how they identify, and to
Mm-hmm.
be respectful of that, you know, and be mindful. So we always do these exercises with our youth, and we started doing them with the staff and with other community members. We'll do like introductions, and part of the introduction, we're going to have an icebreaker. Your
Mm-hmm.
name, your tribal affiliation, and your pronoun.
Mm-hmm.
So every time we start a meeting or every time we start a workshop, or every time we start that club meeting with the kids, we start off with that so that the kids are mindful of each other on how they want to be identified, you know, and be
Mm-hmm.
respectful of that too. So
Mm-hmm.
because
I
not
like that.
everybody identifies, you know, some people are non-binary, you know, some of the youth, and I just, you know, want to make sure that we're, you know, allowing them to be who they want to be, you know, without reprimanding them or making them feel bad, you know, or
Mm-hmm.
making them feel less of a human being. It's to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, honor those pronouns, you know, honor those
Yeah,
pronouns and be mindful of that.
I
It's
love
hard,
it.
you know, because I know like the way we were brought up in the school system, you know, when we're doing that English, you know, class, you know, you have, you know, she, her, him, you know, all that, you know,
Um,
and so like for my mom's generation, it's really hard for my mom to be mindful and remember that because
mm,
when she sees somebody, a person, she identifies their physical appearance as their
mm-hmm.
pronoun. And I'm like, no, mom, you can't do that. This
Mm-hmm.
is what they go by, and this is how you're going to identify them as by, you know.
Uh-huh. I've
Oh.
noticed that a lot of the elders are having a hard time kind of grasping that concept of they or, a woman wanting to be identified as he or opposite, a male
Mhm.
being a she, or, they, and it's like, well, what is they? And so I love that you're talking about this, because a lot of people, I like you just said, I'm seeing they don't understand the pronouns and
Mhm.
why we're switching and kind of like evolving in this way of identifying as they, or
Mhm.
he, she. So I like how you're talking about that, because I really think that, especially going into this new ways, and but bringing old ways back too, there
Mhm.
still has to be that open-mindedness,
Mhm.
of where we're going in the future.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
when we're working with our youth and with our transgender youth, we want to be mindful and respectful of that too. Because even though they might look a certain way, they're in transition, and they don't
Mhm.
feel that way. It's what's in it's what they feel inside,
Mhm.
not how we perceive them outside. So that's one thing
Mhm.
that we utilize is the pronouns, and then also making the classroom welcoming to our youth, our two-spirit youth by bringing visuals into the classroom, or into your organization in the hallways, making it more trauma informed, more diverse, so when our students step in, they see, a diverse of rainbow, or they see photos of two-spirit couples, having
Uh-huh.
those visuals, um, lets the youth know that, hey, you're in a safe space, you're protected here, you're in an organization that's gonna, accept and also honor, the two spirit, community and our status, and they're going to be watching over you,
Mhm.
like having visuals helped a lot. Also having the space for the youth to meet, the gatherings, having workshops, having training too, bringing educators in, like from back east to come and do training with
Mhm.
staff members and teachers, on how to work with, diverse communities, especially in the LGBTQ and two-spirit communities. Like
Mhm.
how to work with families or how to work with youth. We do get a lot of families too that call us, looking for resources, to support their child. So, making sure that you stay, connected to those resources that are out there. They might not be like specific for Native people, but there's resources there that our kids can tap into or our families can tap into as
Mm.
well. Also looking at, not only, bringing back the culture, but also, the proper names, how to address ourselves to that language too. Because Two Spirit, again, is just a broad name that was developed back in 1990 from the committee back east.
Mhm.
It was more broad, but it's not the proper name that identifies you because each tribe has their own way of identifying their Two Spirit people.
Mhm.
So, bringing that back as well, and then our status too, because not all of us, identify as Two Spirit. Maybe some identify as, queer or lesbian or gay, but also, looking at, the Two Spirit status, how it was back then and where it's at now, Um, Two Spirit people back in before colonization had a status just like the medicine people did, they were seen as foster care parents, social workers, um, they did conflict and resolution, naming ceremonies. So things like that, educating community on culture acceptance, bringing back
Mhm.
that piece as well that's missing, like that.
Mhm.
Um, Also, sharing photos and faces of current Two Spirit people and what they do in the community so that our youth are aware, that this person is Two Spirit and this is what they're doing in their community,
Mhm.
having those, relationships there as well. Um, that was another thing that we did at the school with the kids. And then also creating, categories too would be something I would like to see in the future is having two spirit categories so that there's access to opportunity, there's equity there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of times we have the two gender male, female, boys, girls, but there's no categories for two spirit communities
Wow.
to participate at a powwow. And that's something that I would like to see in the future happen is
I
to
would
have
like to see that too.
mhm, is to have those categories available so that our kids, are included as well, or our youth,
Yeah.
or our, community, the Two Spirit community are included in that. So having that's something that I envision to see happen soon. I hope so.
Well, I will help you in any way that I can with those things. I'd love to connect more after this and see what I can
Mhm.
do to help the community and help assist in any way that I can. Because this is important to me too, because I've never had a safe space. My mom created that safe space for me growing up,
Mhm.
and but like with the history, like what you were saying, I was told that like with my family, the two spirit, they were the medicine people, and then she would tell me like the women, especially like with me and the roles that I carry, I would have been more of like the protector. And that's kind of like what I do in the communities now. I fit in the warrior category of protecting, our families, our women, the children, even the men, protecting the two spirits, because it's that masculine role of that warrior, that protector. And so she said that like when the men would go away for war, they go hunting and things like that, it was the two spirit women that actually stood on the outside of camp and watched over camp and protected, the camp, the community, while the men were away. So it was, the two spirit woman that took on that warrior role in the community to watch over the, all of the men and women, or the children and the women that were there in the community while the men were gone. And then the men, if they were that two spirit, they would be brought into, they would be more of the teachers, the herbalists, the medicines gathering, the seamstress, sewing, beadwork, cooking, helping raise these, the babies and things like that. So that's kind of like what I was a little bit brought up and told when I was growing up, as
Mhm.
far as a little bit of what was kind of hushed and kept under, underneath
Mhm.
the dark spaces. But eventually little things, they come out, like you say.
Mhm.
But that's kind of like what I was told was, so being that, that's what I kind of took my role as, was okay, well, I'm that protector. I've always felt like I have that warrior protector, embedded in me to protect women, to protect men even too, and to protect children. So I feel like for me, it's like taking on um, owning that side of the warrior, of the
Mhm.
two spirit, and then also owning the medicine side of it, because a lot of my family, are medicine people, and they were kept quiet and protected because they too are two spirit people.
Mhm.
And so um it's just coming into that. But like what you were saying early when we were talking too, is the generational. So a lot of people don't realize that we're taught things and raised under in the house, and then but when you go outside the house, things are kept quiet and hushed. So you don't really get, the outside world doesn't really get to see, how you were raised with your mom growing up behind closed doors, and those conversations that you got to have. Same thing with my mom. A lot of people don't know about the conversations that she and I have had about me being two spirit, and me needing someone to talk to and relate to and have a safe space for me to go. But it's really important to that, those parents that have the two spirit to learn what creators gifts and callings is for that two
Mhm.
spirit. So it's like we were blessed in a way that, our mothers, they saw that, and so they're like, okay, so you need to be this way, you need to go into this teaching, we're going to teach you
Mhm.
this, we're going to raise you up in this way, because this is who your spirit is. And it's not even really calling you out, oh, you're a two spirit and so we're going to raise you this way. It's no, this is what your spirit is, this is who your spirit is. And it's like my mom would always pray and say, creator, show me what I need to do for my daughter in your way, not what I want, but what you want, because our spirits are differently. And if the way she wanted to react on something could have pushed me far left, and I
Mhm.
would have ran, somewhere else. But being in tune and being able to listen, and it's not just two-spirit children, it's any child too, being
Mhm.
in tune and listening, to what that spirit of that child is and what that spirit, how they need to be brought up and how they need to be raised and educated, and that love and that support. And it's really important to um, have that love and that support at home, because if we didn't have that love and that support at home, who knows, where Renee would be right now, who knows where Rachel would be right now, I could be off drinking or not even here right now, because if I didn't have that love and that support somewhere, then that's where all of our youth and a lot of people, they go into drinking and drugs, and
Mhm.
they isolate and they go somewhere, um, you know, to feel connected, but they're really even more disconnected. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on today and talking about this, because this is, it can be a scary topic, to talk
Mhm.
about.
Yeah.
And when, especially like with us, like what we were saying is like, just because we're two spirit doesn't mean that I'm looking at every woman or I'm looking at
Mhm.
everybody. It's not even in that way. My
Mhm.
mom taught me that I had to learn how to use that two spirit love of both men and women to be
Mhm.
able to just love unconditionally with the heart of creator.
Mhm.
And so she taught me that to use that that two spirit to be able to embrace both genders and love and comfort both. So
Mhm.
then that's where I'm able to connect with, both genders, and to be able to, create that safe space for
Mhm.
both of them. um so yeah, so I just want to thank you,
Mhm.
again, for coming on and all the work that you're doing in the community. And I see the impact that you've been doing over the years, and it's taken, a little bit of time to
Mhm.
create the movement, and but it's very important,
Yeah.
especially in these times right now, to have this safe space for these youth and things like that, especially if we're trying to help mold the future and
Mhm.
create a better future.
Yeah.
So just want to thank you. And then if anybody, if you need to reach out, have any questions, we'll throw Renee's email or contact in the comments below when we get done, so that you can connect with her, or you can always connect with me and I can connect you over to some people um, to further educate, or if you need assistance or advocates, we're here. I'm here for you. You're not alone. And I love that more of us are starting to step into our role. And it's an honor to be walking with you, sister.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
And
Oos.
thank you so much.
Have a beautiful day, everyone.
You too. Thank you for having me.